Welcome back to the final hour of the Gary Sutton Show on WSBA on a Tuesday morning, 1 week away from the primary election on May 20th. And please, again, make sure that you are registered to vote no matter what party you're voting in. Of course, if you're independent in the state of Pennsylvania, you can't vote until later on in the general election. But Democrat or Republican, you can. We're going into a little segment here called Talking the State Issues. And today and tomorrow, we have two of the candidates each day who are running. In this particular case, Elizabeth Roberts and Seth Grove, both of whom are Republican candidates, and they are running for the 196th state House seat, presently held by Mr. Grove. And Mr. Roberts would like to do something about that. And for Mr. Grove, he'd like to hang on to it. Good morning to both of you. Seth, good morning.
Good morning.
And
Great
Beth,
to be
good
here.
morning to you.
Good morning.
I want to talk a little bit about some of the issues today, but one of the things I wanted to ask both of you before we start out this morning, we've been talking on the show about the fact that there's a new study or a new poll that came out that said people aren't real happy in this country about voting right now. You know, why? What's going on right now, and why aren't they happy? Or do you think maybe they are, and maybe the poll is just off base here? Elizabeth, I'm going to start with you.
Why they're not happy specifically about voting?
Yeah, right. Well, not enthused, let's say, about going to the polls.
I think people are at the point where they believe that their vote really doesn't make a difference anymore. Either a vote for a Republican or a vote for a Democrat seems to get you the same thing. It seems to get you more government. And our government is becoming ever invasive and oppressive. And I think people feel like, what's the use? And I actually hear that sentiment a lot while I've been kind of out on the campaign trail talking to voters, like the property tax issue. We've heard this for 20 years.
Mm-hmm.
We're never going to get property tax relief.
Right.
They feel really hopeless. And, one of my arguments and one of the reasons I'm here and one of the reasons that I co-founded the York 912 Patriots was because of the failure of the Republican Party to uphold its principles. And I think a lot of Republicans really feel disenfranchised, that the party that they've been loyal to for so long has abandoned them. And I have this chart here that shows the last 22 years of governance in Pennsylvania.
And we'll get to that in a second. I want to kind of break it down into some of the specifics here in a moment. But I'll go over to Seth for a minute. Seth, a lot of people are saying they're not enthused about voting right now. In fact, we're seeing the lowest numbers we've had in 20 years in the most recent Gallup poll. Put your finger on that if you can.
Yeah, being out there with constituents almost on as much as possible, especially now during election time, getting out there, hitting the doors, there's a huge frustration with the federal government, especially among Republicans who had, voted. I talked to one gentleman who said, what's the difference? And I always explained it to him. If you don't vote, if you don't get out there and vote, you're destined to the same. Obviously, we're trying to fight the Obama agenda in Harrisburg. We have a split government down in D.C. We had a split government in Harrisburg for a while where we had a governor, Ed Rendell. We had Democrats control the House, and we had a Republican state Senate. There's a lot of friction amongst them. We had late budgets. Republicans took control of the government. In 2008, 2009, we were spending $28.3 billion. Last budget we approved, we were spending $28.4 billion. It's effective, it works, but it takes voters to get out there. Here in Pennsylvania, we're getting outvoted by liberals in Philadelphia and the southeast area. So if we don't turn out here in York County and Lancaster County and south central Pennsylvania, we have a net loss in votes. So we got to get our base out to vote. And it's tough. I explained it to like a sports team. If your sports team loses a game, do you stop cheering for them, or do you come back the next week and cheer even harder and want that win more and more? It's the same thing with voting. As a member of the Republican team, I'm a proud Republican. We need to get our people out there. We need them to get and vote. And there are better times ahead of us by doing that. And it's active participation. When you give up, the team gives up, you get a loss, and it's not acceptable.
You're both running for office. You're already serving, obviously, Seth. You're trying to serve, Beth. Both of you have served. You helping to start the Tea Party here. You obviously running and doing the other things you've done over the years. Beth, you're running as a Republican. What should a Republican be? What is it that a Republican should be right now, in your opinion?
Well, I believe in the platform of the Republican Party. They should be about limited government and economic freedom and getting out of people's lives so they can pursue their happiness, so they have opportunity, plan for their retirements, raise their families. But we're not able to do that, and that's what I was getting at with this chart of the last 22 years of governance in Pennsylvania. The Republicans have had the trifecta, the House, the Senate, and the governorship for 11 of the last 22 years. The Democrats have had it one year of the last 22 years. And Pennsylvania is not in great economic standing. And I find that the government is getting more and more oppressive, and this behemoth in Harrisburg is getting bigger and bigger. We can't just continue to blame it on the Democrats. So I feel in order to fight limited government, you need a party that's willing to do that. And then when we talk about winning teams, if your team just keeps losing and losing and losing, eventually you lose faith in it. And that's what I feel like. Republicans compromising is synonymous with Republicans losing.
Let me ask you, how do you see the Republican Party? What you're running as a Republican. What should a Republican be, Seth?
Well, again, Republicans are for small, limited government, fiscal responsibility, fiscal stewardship. Republicans were great at policy. We're great at governing. We're horrible at politics. And that's where the Democrats always get is the political end, the mailers, the talking points, firing back. I worked hard last session on getting working with Kathy Rapp to try to get the require as part of an abortion procedure and the notification and the viewing of the actual test results. It's done by Planned Parenthood. It's part of their policy, and Planned Parenthood came out and opposed it, thinking it was, trying to say it was a huge mandate on women when it's part of their policy. So you can see how the politics play in that, where Republicans have been great at governing. I just went over the state budget, 2008, 2009, $28.3 billion general fund. Today, $28.4 billion. We had a $4.2 billion shortfall deficit that was left by Governor Rendell. We closed it without raising taxes. We've eliminated taxes. We've eliminated the inheritance tax on small businesses, family farms. We've got rid of the corporate loans tax. We're continuing to phase down the capital stock and franchise tax. What else do we need to do? We need to continue to phase out. We need to reduce the corporate net income tax from the highest in all the states, 9.99%, get it down to something reasonable to attract businesses. So we're doing a lot of good work. We have a couple of repealers moving forward. We're finding solutions to huge problems. We're trying to get the state out of the business of a liquor store. We passed that last March, over a year and a half. The Senate hasn't done anything with it. We moved property taxes last October. The Senate hasn't done anything with it. It takes two chambers to do it, and we're continuing the pressure on them to do good stuff to limit government and kind of get the government out of the way of people.
You gave me a beautiful segue in there. Property taxes obviously has been a big thing that you've been talking about. Yep. Pennsylvanians have been talking about it for a long, long time. I want to go to Beth. You obviously proposed, Seth, Bill 1189, and we've been talking about House Bill 76. They have been occupying an awful lot of conversation. I know you two have been asked about it a lot. Beth, your thoughts about these two bills? Which one would be the best for Pennsylvanians in terms of property tax, or is there something else out there?
I obviously believe 76 is a far better bill than Representative Grove's House Bill 1189. And
by the way, Bill 76 eliminates property taxes.
Yes, it does. Yeah. The school property tax.
Right.
It eliminates the school property tax. I do think per the Pennsylvania Constitution, you have the right to be secure in your property. As long as you are held hostage by the school districts with the school property tax, you are not secure in your property. House Bill 1189, this tax package using taxes to offset the property tax. This has been tried before in the past and failed. In the 1960s, we had the 511 tax menu, if you will, an option for districts to choose from 10 different taxes. These three taxes in Representative Grove's bill were offered then, and they weren't used. The districts went by way of the property tax, I guess, seeing that was the biggest flood of revenue. So this has been tried before. It was tried again later with Act 72, I think. And
you're correct. Yep.
Tried again and again rejected by the taxpayers. And I don't believe it is a bill that will do anything. The reason we haven't done local tax shifts before and why nobody bought into them is because a lot of districts don't have the tax base to do that. So shifting, yes, every bill comes with its pains, for sure. I'm not saying 76 is perfect by any means, but we definitely know local tax shifts do not work. And I believe if you don't get rid of the school property tax, if you don't eliminate it completely, as in Representative Grove's bill, let's say they reduced it, there is nothing in place to keep it from going up again. And we know the nature of government. It will. If it's available, they'll take it.
So Beth's in favor of, House Bill 76. Seth, you were the guy. I'll get that right. Who came up with the idea of 1189? Talk about 1189 and why you think that's a better bill than 76, the one that Beth supports.
Yeah. When I was first elected, I was a co-sponsor of the House Bill 76 concept. It was the House Bill, I think, 1275, introduced by Sam Rohr. Working with my colleagues, discussing the issue, many of them have been through the battles previously on property taxes. It's not a new issue for Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, for other states for that matter. Discussing with staff, with my colleagues across the state, I said, why haven't we been able to do this? And time again, it came back. It's not a statewide issue. You're not going to get a statewide tax shift. Members from the areas with low property taxes are not going to raise their constituents' taxes. If we were in Elk County today, we'd be talking about Marcellus Shale. We would not be talking about property taxes, except maybe in the formation of why the heck do these people want to raise their statewide taxes for something we don't have a problem with. So it really comes down to votes. So I looked at the history of the vote count of the House Bill 76 concept. Here's the vote counts. December 13th, 2005, failed 69 to 125. June 13th, 2006, it failed 74 to 128. June 29th, 2008, it failed 47 to 148. October 1st, 2013, it failed 59 to 138. So looking at the reality, the political reality, the vote count, and then, even June of this year, House Bill 76, which, again, has been introduced for almost a decade now, still has drastic shortfalls and undercoming as a policy document. It has constitutional violations, had policy violations, just issues on top of issues. So realizing that, the next session I introduced a local taxing form. It was an EIT with sales tax, moved it out of the Finance Committee, stalled on the House floor because one of the issues is with sales tax and what effect does that have on specifically retailers when you're talking about border counties, the fact that it's a 1% on top of everything. So this session went back, talked to a lot of my colleagues, and we went with the business privilege and mercantile tax. Now, what's interesting about, Beth brought up the former Act 111. School districts who have utilized different taxing tools in this Commonwealth have lower property taxes because they had the other taxing, so they didn't need to rely on property taxes. Well, where school districts who failed to do that have higher property taxes because it's their form of taxation they've had. It's proven statewide. It's proven in other states. Every state that has lower property taxes have some other form of local taxing option. It's a fact. And how we developed House Bill 1189, it's never been tried because we've never given school districts the full ability to just eliminate their property taxes. You can do from elimination, reduction. You can do whatever you want at the local level because, again, it's not a statewide issue. So those of us with a property tax issue, we can take care of it at the local level. 5 school board members. You don't need 102 votes from the House, 26 votes from the Senate, and a governor. You now have an option at the local level where you can take care of your tax mix.
And we're right at a hard break here, so we're going to take that. I want to come back. I think we want to talk a little bit more about the taxing here yet. And one of the questions I would ask both of you, too, maybe to include in your answers, is what is a fair amount of tax for people to pay? I'm one who always goes with Frederick Bastiat, and he said, it's called legal plunder. We wonder, you hear us on our show from time to time saying there is no such thing as a fair tax, but at least unfair tax. What would be the least unfair amount of taxation for Pennsylvanians? As we talk about the property tax issue and others here, between Beth Roberts and Seth Grove, they're running for the 196th Republican nomination or the Republican position for the general election come November, and we'll be back with them right after this. This is the Gary Sutton Show on News Radio 910 WSBA. Beth Roberts and Seth Grove with us here. They are both running for the Republican nomination for the 196th seat here in the York area, and they will be on the ballot next week for the people in the 196th on May 20th. Beth, you heard Seth talking about Bill 1189. You talked about Bill 76. 1189 leaves it more to a local taxation kind of thing. Bill 76 basically wipes out school property taxes. I saw your face, so it looks like we might want to continue this conversation a little bit more. Go ahead.
Yes, Representative Grove often talks about the legislature. They couldn't get the support for 76 in the legislature. William Penn had a quote, and I don't have it written here, so I'm going to do my best to recall it. And it went to the effect that right is right even if nobody supports it, and wrong is wrong even if everyone supports it. And I think that's the case with the legislature. The wrong on this issue. This is a state issue. Even if some districts aren't plagued by property taxes as much as other districts, the Constitution says it's a state issue. The Constitution says you have the right to your property. It's not ambiguous at all. I don't know how you can have that right when you can invest in a home for 30 years, your property taxes can continue to skyrocket, and then you could be in danger of losing that home. That is not conducive to liberty.
Seth, your thoughts on the whole idea of the taxes? We continue our discussion there.
Yeah, I mean, the whole scope of what we should be doing is broad-based low taxes. That's the driver. How do we get low taxes across the board? Number one, when you look at property tax, it's more than just the property taxes. It's cost. It's pension costs. It's mandates. It's school district spending habits. It's the employee compensation packages. It's federal government. It's special ed. There's a lot of issues to it, and we're tackling issue by issue. So I departmentalize property taxes into, let's talk about taxation locally. What's a better form of taxation than property taxes? Let's look at taxes that naturally grow with the economy where property taxes don't. School districts need more money for their spending. They raise rates. Let's look at something the state has. We have more, we've had increase in revenues, but we haven't raised taxes to get there because we have a natural growth with the economy. It's more in line with realities of what's happening. Now, school districts, local governments like property taxes because it's, steady revenue, but it doesn't reflect the true nature of what's happening in the general public. If you have a down economy, you should have less revenue. You should reduce your spending. It shouldn't stay the same. You should be reducing your spending. So switching over to a different tax structure, like we envision 1189, and it's not about more spending. That money is locked in. So the only thing it can do is alleviate property taxes and keep driving them down. So any natural growth continues to reduce property taxes. It's effective. And at the end of the day, it's less taxes. That's the goal.
When we come back, I want to ask both of you about pensions. We're going to get into Common Core, or the Pennsylvania core version of that. Also want to get into the severance tax on natural gas extraction. I've heard a lot of the gubernatorial candidates, particularly on the Democratic side, talking about that. Is that something that we're putting there? And also at the end, how do we make Pennsylvania more business friendly in the long run here? Those are some of the questions that we'll have, and a few more as we go along the way here, as we come back after the bottom of the hour here with Beth Roberts and Seth Grove, both Republican candidates for the 196th State House seat, and they are talking the state issues here today on the Gary Sutton Show. 1 week out from the primary election, get ready to vote next week. Don't fit the numbers. Everybody says it's going to be low. No, make it high. Okay, step one out there. And again, freedom isn't free, and our vote is the most free thing that we do every time it comes up. It's the bottom of the hour here on the Gary Sutton Show. We'll be right back after this on News Radio 910 WSBA. Welcome back to the Gary Sutton Show as we're talking the state issues here among two of our candidates for the 196th State House seat, the Republican side, and Elizabeth Roberts and Seth Grove with us here this morning on the Gary Sutton Show. Elizabeth, I want to come back with you. Pensions. There are a lot of people out there talking about pensions, and yet it seems like we've been talking about it for a long time, and yet we're waiting to see what's going to happen. It's kind of like the elephant in the room. Your thoughts about pensions and dealing with that behemoth here in Pennsylvania?
Okay, definitely we need to start by eliminating the legislator pensions. And Representative Grove had said something interesting the other day at the York Daily Record meeting, that he qualified for half a per diem, $70 a day for lunch, I guess, while they're in session. We're talking about exorbitant amounts of money that our legislators are collecting that the Constitution doesn't allow them to collect. Correct. So I was kind of looking at the math on that. So if you took $70 a day, times, let's say 200 people collected it out of the 253, it's $14,000 a day, timed by 77 days in the last session. We're talking about well over $1 million just to cover a per diem. They're not entitled to that. They should have gotten rid of that. The pensions, of course, this big pension crisis, they shouldn't have been collecting the pensions anyway. Again, the Constitution doesn't allow it. But back in 2001, our legislators voted to increase their own pensions by 50%, public employee pensions by 25%. And that's why we have this $47 billion in unfunded pension liabilities. So I think the first step in this is to get rid of the legislator pension altogether. It's unconstitutional, and they shouldn't be taking it. And those that are taking it, to me, are violating the Constitution, the Pennsylvania Constitution. That's one thing. I think we need to move all employees into a defined contribution retirement plan. What I know, and I don't know all of the answers here, but what I do know is we can't put the General Assembly's mistakes on the backs of the taxpayers. This is a colossal blunder on their part, and they need to figure out how to pay it with existing revenue.
Seth, your thoughts on public pensions? Obviously a big concern for Pennsylvanians right now as they see the bill coming.
Yeah, absolutely. I've been working on pension reform since first taking office. I actually voted against Act 120 pension reform because it didn't go far enough. We need to get to a defined contribution system for all local governments, just not state employees, school employees, but across the board. The issue is the driver, cost driver. That's the unfunded liability. How do you pay that off? Now, we've been making our payments to our pension system ever since taking the General Assembly. We've been paying what we owe as far as it goes. Unfortunately, if you would switch to a flat-up DC, you would increase your costs because of transition costs, et cetera. What we're looking at moving when we get back in June is a hybrid approach that allows you to pay off the unfunded liability within the pension system. So we're not asking the taxpayers for a dime more in pension costs. We're not raising taxes. We're not talking about bonding or borrowing. We're going to do it with transforming the existing system to make it beneficial to the taxpayers, share the liability, reduce the liability on taxpayers. And I've been taking a lead on the municipal pension reform. We have billions of dollars of unfunded liabilities for our local governments. What I'm very, very worried about for the residents of the 196th district, particularly those who work in New York City, is if Act 47, York City goes into Act 47, there'll be a commuter tax. I'm trying to prevent that, looking down the line to say, what can I do as a state legislature to prevent that from happening? When I look at York City's costs, it's their pension. So to find a very good cash balance plan, it's a hybrid plan, it's a DC DB component. There's no transition costs. At the end of the day, whatever the employee has in their account, just like a DC, is how much they get at retirement. For public safety employees, the state mandated is 50% of salary. We're looking 42% of the salary, and it's going to save York City. It's going to save Scranton. It's going to save a lot of these municipalities on the brink of disaster and prevent other areas from being in the brink of disaster as well. So we need a holistic approach to pensions. And I do appreciate Beth pointing out that I don't take per diem. I don't even take mileage except for committee trips because it's, to me, it's part of the job. And it's about sacrifice. That's what public safety is about. It's 110% about sacrifice and giving back to the general public. So as far as that, we don't take the perks, but we got to handle the pension, especially with the budget deficit we're looking at for this year. And budget deficit is because we've been cutting taxes. We've been reducing costs in Pennsylvania. I know we're going to hit on how to transform Pennsylvania into a job-friendly state. That's part of it.
Let's talk a little bit about the Common Core and its application here in Pennsylvania as far as education is concerned. A lot of people have been talking about it. A lot of people concerned about it. A lot of people concerned that it's not based in real good educational goals. Beth, your thoughts about the PA Common Core?
Representative Grove said on an ad on ABC 2070, said, "I've ended Common Core in Pennsylvania." From a mailer I have in front of me, Seth led the charge to scrap Common Core academic standards and replace them with Pennsylvania's own proven and effective standards. We know, or we don't know, it's very convoluted if you start exploring the origins of Common Core, but we know they're heavily funded by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, ultra-liberal Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. In addition to that they originated somewhere there, were fed to the states via the Federal Department of Education. The states adopted them without a vote in the General Assembly. They just bypassed the people's representatives for a vote. That alone should have been a big enough reason to stop them. Pennsylvania's regulatory laws say that you have to submit, it is required to get regulations passed in Pennsylvania, that you have to submit a fiscal impact statement. They did not. They said that the Department of Education, Secretary Dumaresque, when I was at the IRC meeting, said that the fiscal impact of the new standards is zero. It's impossible. And as a teacher, Gary, you change standards, you change curriculum.
Yes.
You spend a lot of teacher training, a lot of time aligning your curriculum to those standards, and the standards do dictate curriculum. So this is kind of nonsense to say, the districts will be in charge of their own curriculum and their own methods. No, there are a certain set of methods that are associated with teaching these standards in the Common Core curriculum. Because of the outcry of the voters, so that should have stopped it. Never mind the standards themselves. The standards themselves are a poor set of standards. The idea behind the standards, if you push critical thought a little bit earlier, the kids will become critical thinkers. That's not true. We know the way kids learn. They learn in developmental stages, just like they grow physically, they grow cognitively, and trying to force something before it's ready to happen is counterproductive. And we've shown that trying to force critical thought at too early of an age actually ends up in never producing rhetorical thought. This is not arguable. This is 2,000 years of understanding human behavior, of educating people. We know this to be true. And that's the whole premise of the Common Core standards. Representative Grove said he's ended Common Core in PA. And he has, it says, Seth led the charge to scrap Common Core academic standards and replace them with Pennsylvania's own proven and effective standards, own in all capital letters. I asked Representative Grove the other day if he could please produce the data that shows these standards have been proven to be effective in a year's time, because these standards were written in response to the outcry over Common Core. If you look at the standards, if you go to the Department of Education website, they have a crosswalk there, a standards crosswalk. You can look at the PA Core standards, the Common Core standards, and the old standards. The PA Core standards and the Common Core standards are the same set of standards, give or take a little tweaking.
We'll go to Seth and talk about Common Core. And Seth, your thoughts about Common Core, Common Core.
Here's the real history of academic standards and how they rolled out. In 1996, under the Ridge administration, we created the Pennsylvania, or the General Assembly at the time, with the administration, created Pennsylvania standards. It's the first standards we've ever had in the Commonwealth. Common Core was actually developed by the National Governors Association, working with the school education secretaries. They developed a Common Core of curriculum to be adopted state by state. They didn't have to adopt it verbatim. They could utilize it, merge it with their own standards and so forth. So it was basically a 10th Amendment process to get standards done. What do we know? We know for a fact that when Jeb Bush was governor of Florida, he had some of the best education reforms coming out of the state. They always increase standards every few years to increase the bar, have higher expectations. And from what we have seen in Pennsylvania, we have students going to colleges and universities who are taking remediation. They shouldn't have to take remediation because as taxpayers, we paid billions of dollars in state taxpayer funds to make sure they have some level of education. We have businesses, and talk about another way to create a business-friendly state here in Pennsylvania. We have businesses paying millions of dollars in job training for what students should have been, their workers should have been learned here in K through 12 education. So 2010, Governor Rendell adopted the Common Core for verbatim. In 2013, the Corbett administration moved away from the Common Core and adopted their own Pennsylvania Core academic standards. They looked at our old Pennsylvania standards. They looked at Common Core. They said, which is a higher standard? So we're always increasing rigor. We have higher expectations of students graduating high school. So had we not done that change, and Beth did not support that change, we would still have Common Core academic standards here in Pennsylvania verbatim. What we did was very good for education, increasing standards, increasing expectations at the K through 12 level, and these are just minimum standards. Obviously, a school at any point can increase their standards above what we do. Now, standards are not curriculum. So standards say, this is what you shall teach in which grade. How you teach it is always left up to that school district. So teachers, principals, they'll work together, set their curriculum, and then that's how education is rolled out. Within the standards, we protect local choice. We protect, ensure that locals still have that ability to set their own curriculum. We're not meddling in that whatsoever. So what we'll see out of this is better educated students graduating, better expectations. So we'll have less student debt, less students taking remediation courses, a better trained workforce ready to go in. So less need to spend money, taxpayers' money on job training. It's a good deal.
I'm going to give each of you 1 minute on this further. Go ahead.
Representative Grove, if the old standards did not work, if the kids did not meet the requirements of the old standards, what makes you think the kids are just going to meet the requirements of a new, more, your word, rigorous set of standards? If they didn't meet the old standards, why would just saying we're going to regulate this new set of standards, why would they meet that new set of standards? This is not how education, this is not how kids operate. Secondly, you said earlier that education, we needed to reel in the spending on education with fewer mandates. This is a huge unfunded mandate that's going to be passed on to the school districts. And your own words, again, Pennsylvania's own proven and effective standards, you have never answered how they were proven to be effective. I'd like to see the data on that. You've also said, I've ended Common Core in PA. If we go into 50 schools in the districts out here, I'll bet you every one of them is working on Common Core. So what you're saying is not true.
Let's go over to Seth. Seth, go ahead. Your response.
It's absolutely true. We had Common Core. We moved away from it. If we had Common Core, it would be the same exact standards as Rendell approved for the Commonwealth in 2010. Call side, school districts rolled in. They knew about this was coming. They provide curriculum changes, book changes. It's all built into their budget to begin with. So the rolling out with it, there's no huge cost associated with it. So I don't know where you're getting cost numbers. When you talk to school districts, you talk to their business managers, you talk about their budgets. There's no cost there. The costs are healthcare because of Obamacare and pensions. Those are the cost drivers in the school districts. That's reality. That is what's driving up property taxes. So those are the things we need to tackle and relay. Luckily here in Pennsylvania, we didn't expand Medicaid under Obamacare. We cut that out, didn't do it. And two, when you look at academic standards, again, Florida, as they raise their academic standards, student achievement increases, particularly with minority students in poor school districts. Academic achievement occurs. The data is proven. It shows it. Florida is a great example, but it's just not academic standards. You need merit pay. You need economic furloughs. There's a lot of other education reforms you need to do. This is a piece of puzzle. Mm-hmm. This is a piece of the puzzle.
Beth, have about a minute.
Yeah, the problem with education is not the standards. The problem with education is that it is drowning or suffocating under government solutions. Now we're going to throw another layer of government on top of it. And Representative Grove, I was a teacher. I worked in a school where we were making the transition to Common Core, and we were realigning the curriculum. And this takes money, and the idea that there is no cost, no fiscal impact to implement Common Core is nonsense. And with teachers in higher education especially, with this new transition to an emphasis on reading nonfiction material, reading informative text, teachers that are not trained in that will require new training to be trained in this. A lot of the math teachers aren't trained in. So teacher training, realigning the curriculum, new materials, this costs money.
40 seconds, Seth.
We do not have any reading lists whatsoever in our standards. I don't know where that information is coming from. And again, curriculum's decided at the local level. If the school district decides to go with a whole new way of teaching, that's on the school district. That's not a requirement of the state whatsoever. And again, every complaint I've heard about Common Core is not coming from Pennsylvania. It's coming from other states that adopted Common Core and adopted it very poorly. We did a good job here in Pennsylvania. That's why you're not hearing the screams, minus some decisions local school districts made within their curriculum.
We're going to take a break. When we come back, we're left with 5 minutes right now. So we got about a million things we want to cover.
Yep.
But what I'm going to ask both of you when we come back is this. What are the biggest issues today in Pennsylvania? And I'd also like to kind of lead with, what about the severance tax on Marcellus Shale and drawing shale out of the ground? Are we taxed enough right now already, or is a severance tax needed? We'll ask you that question and get both of you to kind of talk a little bit more about what you think are the very biggest things that concern you today, other than the ones we've already talked about. Right here on the Gary Sutton Show, we'll be back with Elizabeth Roberts and also Seth Grove here on WSBA. Welcome back to the Gary Sutton Show on WSBA. As always happens, there's always too little time and too much to talk about. We're with Elizabeth Roberts and Seth Grove, who are running for the 196th state seat, the Republican side. And I want to ask Beth, and we're going to do about 2 minutes apiece here. Beth, what are the biggest issues right now we haven't talked about yet today? I mentioned about the severance tax on gas, but there are other things I'm sure that concern you as well.
I definitely would not support a severance tax on the gas industry, and I honestly don't support the impact fee, not the way it's collected. If a municipality wants to work that out with the gas company and collect it to remedy the impact of the drilling, that would be fine. But right now, the impact fee goes to the Utilities Commission, where it's then dispersed, and millions, of course, then get lost in the black hole of Harrisburg. So I don't even agree with the impact fee the way it's currently collected. And I don't believe in targeting certain businesses or certain industries, lest you be next. My biggest concern in this state right now, states are successful in spite of the federal government. So we can point the finger to the federal government as the biggest part of the problem. But in reality, it isn't, because there are a lot of states out there that are successful regardless of federal encroachments. But we aren't one of them. I think this kind of prolific legislation, the idea that Representative Grove is the author, and he takes great pride in this, of 2,972 pieces of new legislation, the sponsor. And the people can't keep up with this. You can't spend full time watching your representatives, but to live in a free society, and you were kind of suggesting this earlier, talking about this earlier, you bear a responsibility as a citizen to keep it free and to keep an eye on what your representatives are doing. And you just can't. It has become so convoluted. We are so far removed from the Constitution, and we need to get back to that. And there are legitimate ways to save money.
And I'll have to jump in there because we're right at our minute and a half. I'm going to have a minute and a half left here for Seth. Final thoughts from you on other issues that are important.
Yeah, don't support a severance tax. The impact fee is exactly what the residents of the 196 requested in dealing with that. It collects a fee to deal with the impact, both at the state level and the local level of drilling. It creates a reserve fund to ensure if anything does happen, similar to a BP, taxpayer dollars won't go to collect it. So it's back on the actual drillers. So everything that I've heard from the numerous town hall meetings I have done fit exactly with what that impact fee does and solves. But severance tax, bridge too far. We already have a bad tax structure here in business climate. Those drillers could leave anywhere else.
About 40 seconds.
Also, co-sponsoring legislation is how you get stuff done. I've co-sponsored 2,972 pieces of legislation over 3 terms. That's bridge naming, that's right to work, that's reducing the size and scope of government, that's good conservative stuff, stopping abortion, protecting marriage. You need to do legislation to get things done in the General Assembly. I've been very successful at doing that, from stopping sexting, getting rid of the Act 1 index, motorcycle safety. Time and time again, I've proven to be a successful legislator.
Well, it's good having both of you here today. Thank you both for the effort to serve. I hope people will look into what you have to offer. You can Google both your names. It's a wonderful thing about now. And of course, check back on what you said. And we'll also put this up on the web tomorrow so people can kind of go back at facebook.com/910WSBA. Thank you all for joining us today. Please make sure you vote next Tuesday. And thank you to Beth and Seth for joining us here in the studio. We're looking forward to another talk about the issues tomorrow with Ernie Marasotis and Kristen Phillips Hill. Have a great day, everyone. It's high noon.